By any standard, this is a wow moment, and I really appreciate it. I'm grateful and touched to have been selected to receive this honor. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of you who had anything to do with the nomination and selection for this opportunity. It is the most meaningful award I've ever received, or expect to receive, as I'm going to rule out the possibility of the Oscar and even the Nobel Prize and the Congressional Medal of Honor. As Jack Benny said when he received an award, he said, "I really don't deserve this, but I have arthritis, and I don't deserve that either." So this sort of evens things out. So I will set aside my suspicions that this is some sort of mistake and just graciously acknowledge that I am proud to be among the more accomplished and more worthy alumni who are being recognized today and have been recognized in the past. But there is a splendid symmetry to the whole idea of the Chancellor of UCLA giving me this podium today. The last time I spoke in the presence of a Chancellor of UCLA was in 1967, when I was the graduate student valedictorian. At that time, the looming issue was that the newly elected governor of California, Ronald Reagan, had proposed tuition. And it was the major issue of the time that there would be tuition. Now, just a few weeks before I turned 67, I know it's a stretch, graduating in 67, turning 67, but there's a symmetry to that, I thought. And just a few hundred yards from the scene of my original crime, I've been given an opportunity for a return engagement a day after a 60s-type demonstration about tuition occurred just on this campus. Now, my speech 42 years ago to a packed Pauley Pavilion received mixed reviews. In fact, there was a cacophony of both cheers and jeers. Chancellor Franklin Murphy was decidedly on the jeering side. He wasn't happy with everything I said, including the fact that I said, if our generation does not take our leadership responsibilities seriously, our nation will be run by men with empty slogans and simplistic solutions. I suppose I should have stopped there, but I didn't. I then went on to name the mayor of Los Angeles, one of California's United States senators, and the state's governor. Oh, and I also said some pretty unkind things about President Johnson and the Vietnam War. So you can understand that I really never expected to have another chance to speak, let alone to be honored at a UCLA gathering of this importance. Now, to be honest, I'm not sure whether this opportunity is a reflection of the idea that somebody thinks I've redeemed myself over the years, or just it's the fact that the lack of discretion has been lost in the institutional memory, and the university is making the same mistake twice. As I prepared these remarks, I realized that if this is really as good as it's going to get, if this is the highest award I'll ever achieve, if this really is the top of the Hooray for You summit, then this is the last time I'm going to be able to address the people I care about most in this world, and that's my friends and my family. And so there was a great temptation to want to share all my life lessons, and I did, in fact, condense it to roughly 100 single-space pages. But I decided that probably wouldn't be appropriate, but it's still a lot of pressure. So I started to review my college years and try to say, what could I say that might be of some value to my family and my children and my wife and all the family that's here. And I began to realize how much, more than I knew, that my ideas and ideals were shaped in the 7 years I was at UCLA, from 1960 to 1967. But also I realized how dramatically the nation had changed, all, by the way, without my help. When I entered UCLA in 1960, I had Brill cream in my hair and Brigitte Bardot on my mind. My symbols of youthful defiance were black leather jackets, blue jeans, beer, and cigarettes. I knew about blue suede shoes and hound dogs, but not about Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band or even the concept of a Grateful Dead. Consciousness of the depth of discrimination in the South and hostility of race relations everywhere else was just beginning. Intermarriage was actually a crime in some states, and so was birth control. No major city had ever had a black mayor, let alone a U.S. senator. We didn't have the pill, and it was still a few years before the sexual and feminist revolutions. And we were in the midst of a Cold War. People charged with crimes in 1960 had no effective right to counsel or protection from arbitrary searches and seizures. By the time I graduated in 1967, and immediately after, society was so vastly different. The youth culture had turned in two directions, militant and mellow. The militants marched, sat in, burned draft cards and bras, and even rioted. The mellows became hippie dropouts, immersing themselves in drugs, sex, and talk of peace. The political world was chaotic and violent. Supreme Court cases established new rights, and now the police were protesting that we were coddling criminals. Portions of our cities were burned and pillaged, and people died in race riots. Civil rights workers were beaten and murdered. Southern political leaders openly defied the federal government, claiming their absolute right to segregation. And piece by piece, we became embroiled in the Vietnam War, which took an enormous toll in human lives. At one time, over 500,000 troops were dedicated to the Vietnam War and really the fabric of our society. But most of all, during that period that I so vividly remember, the concept of the mortality of youth and the mortality of power was clear as John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. His brother Robert had been assassinated. Martin Luther King had been assassinated. And even Malcolm X had been assassinated. Now, during this turmoil, I and my classmates were safely ensconced in the groves of academe. Though some have complimented my resume of achievements, I look back on my college days with a bit of shame. While others were riding freedom buses to register voters in Mississippi or march in Selma or to Washington, I was tackling the problem of getting discounts for books in our student store. While I was a law student challenging the system by proving I could get good grades without going to class or buying any books, others were fighting and dying for our country. While I was using my leadership skills to improve the UCLA moot court program, others were forming activist organizations that were doing real battle in the real world on real issues. All this explains why in my valedictory address, I think I was so adamant in urging my classmates that it was time for us to pay our dues. It was time for us to make a difference. It was time for us to put to use all of this skill and abilities and knowledge that we had put together. Now, presumably, I'm honored today for what I did in the 4 decades since I graduated. I've been a professor and entrepreneur, and for my work with the nonprofit institute I founded in honor of my parents, Joseph and Edna Josephson. I'm glad this work has been noticed and appreciated. And though I'm not embarrassed by my efforts, I'm not impressed or satisfied either. I truly don't know whether any of the things I've said or done will have any lasting social impact. Kids are still cheating. Violence is rampant. Corruption and irresponsibility in business and politics are far too common. And all the while, civility and respectful discourse are deteriorating. So if I can't claim victory in my life's work, how should I, or how should any of us, measure our lives? It's tempting to look at all the different ways we have been graded and evaluated in the past. Gold stars on a wall chart, the reading group we were assigned to, or the grades on our report card, or our IQ, or GPAs, SAT scores. Which college admitted us, who offered us jobs, how much we earned, and of course, major recognitions and awards like this one. There's no shortage of scorecards telling us how we are doing. I'm surely not the first to come to this conclusion, but the pleasures that one gets from these external affirmations tends to be short-lived. Real contentment, enduring happiness, and a sense of fulfillment comes from the gratification we get from 2 things, I believe: our work and our relationships. Ever since law school, I have been blessed with the ability to choose my work, first as a teacher and next as a stand-up philosopher. What could be better than giving speeches, writing, and even the luxury of a radio platform to say anything that I want?